Let's fix that camera there. There we go. All right. Hey, what's going on? Charles Austin here, and let's be fit forever. All right, it's a happy, wonderful, nice Saturday afternoon. And today we are talking. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, y'all. I had to adjust that camera a little bit. It was off. So today we're talking about the truth about carbohydrates. All right. So one of those topics that are commonly misunderstood, misconstrued, misinformation, if you will, and we'll do our best to kind of dispel those myths and tell you the real truth about those things we call carbohydrates. But as always, before we get started, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, make sure you turn those notifications on so that you're always up to date with the latest content here on the channel. All right. So again, talking about the truth about carbs, you know I like to jump right in. So let's go ahead and get started by actually breaking down what carbohydrates are. Okay. So again, you've probably heard carbohydrates referred to as carbs always, right? Well, the true thing about carbohydrates is they're basically a type of macronutrient. And anytime you hear the word macronutrient, we just mean we need a bunch of it, right? So you'll also see fats. You'll also see proteins as well as macronutrients, all right? So it's found in many foods and beverages. The vast majority of carbohydrates occur naturally in plant-based foods like grains and others, right? Um, Unfortunately, there are ways to actually manufacture these carbohydrates as well, and those are the processed foods in the form of starch or added sugar, okay? So common sources of carbohydrates include things like fruits, right? Your apples, your bananas, your strawberries, etc., right? Vegetables, nuts, grains, seeds, and also beans, lentils, okay? Why did I skip over milk? Well, nobody should be drinking this anyway. Cow's milk is for baby cows and not for humans, but we'll save that for another day, okay? So there's different types of carbohydrates. You can have carbs in the form of sugar, and this is like the simplest form, okay? So you'll have fruit sugar that comes from, if you're talking about your fruits, veggies, and everything, you'll get fructose, right? You also have table sugar, right? If you add sugar to something, sucrose, etc. Okay. Generally, added sugars are going to be found in things like cookies and candy and stuff like that, right? Now, you also have starch, which is a complex carb. All right, and we'll get into the difference between complex and simple in just a little bit. And a complex carb just means on your molecular level, you're just having more sugars bonded together, right? Those include vegetables, grains, beans, etc. as well. And then also fiber, which is super important. If you saw my video on diabetes, which I have provided a link to that video below in the comment section or in the description section, you'll remember how important fiber is, right? This is another complex carbohydrate which also occurs naturally in fruits, veggies, and whole grains, right? So let's kind of get into why the heck do we even need carbs, right? I think a lot of us just think about carbs and we just say, "Ooh, let me run from those," because everything you see in the media says, low carb or high protein, right? So why do we even need carbs, right? Well, as you can see here, the main purpose for carbohydrates is to provide our bodies with energy, okay? And energy basically helps us do everything, right? If you think about it, whether it's our beating heart, or whether it's nerve impulses coming from to and from our brain, whether it's the simple concept of breathing, thinking, even sitting in this chair or sitting on your couch if you're watching me right now. All of these things require energy, and that is the main purpose of these things that we call carbs or carbohydrates. Okay, um, so um, so when you eat carbs, right, your body basically breaks them down into these simple sugars, which are absorbed into the bloodstream. Okay, and uh, we're kind of breaking down the process of blood sugar uptake into the bloodstream, which is super important to when we start talking about blood sugar spikes here in just a second, and how that relates to the onset of diabetes, right? But so again, when you eat foods, right, your body breaks it down into sugars, And as these sugar levels rise in your body, your pancreas, which is a super important organ for regulating blood sugar, right? It releases a hormone called insulin, okay? And insulin is needed to help basically process the energy from the foods that we eat into our cells, okay? And if that doesn't happen, uh, our cells are not going to work, our organs aren't going to work, and we are not going to work, okay? So that's the main reason why we need carbohydrates, okay? And a lot of people always wonder why they are fatigued or they're sluggish or maybe they can't process or think as fast as they used to. Maybe they just feel like they're a little bit off, right? Well, a lot of that is because our brain is like the largest, biggest, most, or the highest consumer of these carbohydrates in our whole body, right? So our brain uses about 20% of the body's carbohydrate or glucose energy, right? So we take in food and our body is processing it and breaking it down into energy. Our brain is like, bam, give me 20% right off the bat. And now that other 80% has to kind of be divided out throughout the rest of the body. And that's a big chunk. So one of the reasons, if you ever notice, if you're driving into work or if you're studying in school or you're trying to perform at work, or if you're doing any type of task and you notice, man, why can't I quite figure this task out, or why am I so sluggish? Why am I feeling tired about around this topic, right, or around this task? Well, a lot of times it's because we haven't properly supplied our brain with enough fuel to perform properly. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go on throughout the rest of the day, right? So, um, one of the biggest issues that we have is the confusion related to good carbs and bad carbs. And I don't necessarily like to describe them as good and bad, but what we'll do is we'll just kind of describe them as simple and complex and explain kind of how these carbohydrates get labeled as good or bad, right? So if we look here, let's talk about some of the sources, right? And this is kind of where we get this fear associated with carbohydrates. Like, why are we afraid of carbohydrates, right? So let's look at let's look here. Some of the sources of simple carbohydrates, okay? And what exactly is a simple carbohydrate? Again, the article is titled "What is the difference between good and bad?" We don't necessarily need to think of them as good and bad, but we do need to make sure we understand how to incorporate these types of carbs into our diets, right? So basically, if you're talking about simple carbs, or again, if you remember, we're not necessarily using that word, but if we say simple, that's kind of the ones that we're talking about here, right? So these are the carbs that have many of their necessary nutrients removed. All right, so let's start there. A good example would be like a grain. Okay, so generally when you see the title whole grain, right? Whole grain just basically means that it's in its closest to natural form, right? So as you can see, this is kind of like a diagram showing you the parts of a grain, and it normally has this outer layer of bran, right? Raisin bran. Does that sound familiar, right? But this outer layer of bran, there's also a core of germ as well, which, as you can see, contains lots of antioxidants, vitamin E, B, etc. Right? And then you have this layer here as well, which is mainly carbs and proteins. Okay, but primarily carbs. So when you have a whole grain, it has all of those parts included, right? It's close to natural as you can make it, and this is the kind that will have a lot of fiber and a lot of nutrition. So when you're talking about carbs, yes, this is a great thing to eat, okay? Because look at it, we're getting B vitamins, we're getting fiber, we're getting antioxidants, we're getting healthy fats. But if we look over here and we're talking about processed, we'll just call this the processed grain over here. Well, basically they've ripped off two parts of the grain that makes it healthy, it makes it good for us, okay? So as you can see in the image, it's just the rich carbohydrate layer that remains after they've done the processing. So that's one of the biggest issues. So as we go back here, we said again, carbohydrates that have their necessary nutrients removed, that's what we're talking about, okay? So these simple carbs are digested quickly, and this causes large spikes in the blood sugar, and the result of that is it makes you feel hungry even sooner, and then this causes us to overeat, and some of these results can be weight gain or even conditions like diabetes and even high blood pressure. Again, I provided a link to my video on eliminating diabetes without medication in the description of this video, okay? So some of those examples, again, white bread, any type of like pastry, cookie, all those type of things, white rice, refined bread, and things like that. So those are good examples of simple carbohydrates, right? So we keep hearing this this deal here, right here. Spikes in blood sugar or blood sugar spikes. Well, what the heck is a blood sugar spike? What is that? Okay. So if we think about it, okay, well, let's just talk about it here. All right. So blood sugar spikes. These are normally caused when a simple sugar known as glucose builds up in your bloodstream. Again, when you eat a food, your body's doing its best job to turn that food into glucose in order for us to use it as energy, right? So, again, most of the food you eat is broken down into glucose. We know that our body needs it. It's our primary fuel source that makes our muscles and our organs. And again, we already talked about that our brain uses a lot of energy, 20% at least, give or take, right? But the thing about it is glucose cannot be used unless it enters our cells. We talked about that already. We eat food. Our pancreas works with our body to process that food into glucose and get into our cells, right? So here it is again. Insulin, a hormone produced by our pancreas, unlocks the cells so that glucose can enter them, right? Now, without insulin, glucose keeps floating around in our bloodstream with nowhere to go and can be increasingly more concentrated over time, okay? So this is the issue we have. Oh, hi. I'm waving back. For all the folks that's checking out on Facebook, man, y'all better get over on YouTube. You're missing the screen share. So I'm providing all the imagery and the information over on YouTube, yeah? So this is what y'all missing out. But hopefully y'all are listening over there as well, all right? But, so again, we said a second ago that without the insulin, our glucose is going to keep floating around in our bloodstream, and it doesn't have anywhere to go. So when we start hearing about blood sugar spikes, all right, we're having too much glucose in our blood for our pancreas and our insulin to help get into our cells. So now this glucose isn't getting used, okay? It's not getting used at all. All right, now as it goes on to say, when glucose builds up in our bloodstream, your blood glucose levels rise, okay? So again, when we eat, all right, we're supposed to eat just enough food for our body to process and utilize to make everything work, right? And if we're training, we want to use that fuel for our training, right? Our exercise, okay? But if we're not training, we want to use that fuel for our regular everyday bodily processes, right? So again, as it says here, over time this builds up and this can cause damage to our organs, specifically our kidneys, all right? Our pancreas, our liver. It can cause damage to our nerves and our blood vessels with that increase in glucose in our bloodstream, okay? So as we go on here, untreated high blood sugar can be dangerous, leading to a serious condition in diabetics called ketoacidosis, and we'll go into that in just a second. So real quick, just to recap, the biggest issue with blood sugar spikes, if you missed anything or if I went a little too fast, is we eat food. Every time we eat food, right, our body's trying to process that, break it down to glucose. Our pancreas helps with insulin to get that energy into our cells, and we use it. But if we have the wrong type of carbohydrates in our body too often, and we're not utilizing the type of carbohydrates in our body too often, we have blood sugar spikes, and then over time, that builds up, and now we have issues, okay? So, as we go on, some of the issues related to refined carbs, like we talked about already. This is the image we use again to show how they rip off all the good stuff. Okay. So again, Obesity is one of the biggest risks, right? Well, why? Too many refined carbs, like we talked about, digest too quickly. So, for example, if you eat candy, what happens when you eat candy is you feel a great rush of energy, and that's the blood sugar spike. And after your body has processed that sugar so quickly, now you're like, well, I don't have any energy. I want to eat again. Okay? So now we digest those carbs quickly. We eat some of those same carbs again, and we keep having those blood sugar spikes up and down, up and down. And again, when we do this over and over again, it causes us to continue to overeat. All right? And over time, we're storing these unused glucose sources, and we're storing them as fat, and that's what is the result: obesity over time, right? It's well been documented that type 2 diabetics have an issue with having too much blood sugar, right? So again, over time, if we're always constantly eating the wrong type of carbohydrates, okay, and we're eating these and they're not combined with the amount of fiber and activity that they need, now we'll have increase in blood sugar levels. All right. We can also have an increase in blood triglyceride levels, which increases your risk for heart disease and type 2 diabetes. And the other thing on diabetes, remember, our pancreas is working with insulin with our bodies to help bring that glucose into our cells. And a lot of times we have damage to our pancreas because you're overworking it. Okay. Your pancreas doesn't want to have to always secrete insulin all day, every day. But when you have the wrong type of carbohydrates too often, your pancreas is always secreting insulin, always trying to compensate for that wrong type of glucose that's getting into the body, and you can overwork it, and that's when diabetes starts to form and you have issues with your pancreas. Okay, and that's a big deal. Okay, so again, we kind of already outlined the type of we talked about blood sugar spikes already. We kind of outlined the type of carbs that are considered simple. So what kind of carbohydrates should we be eating, right? So we should be focusing on things that are complex, okay? Again, simple carbohydrates go into the body and they are broken down quickly and they cause a blood sugar spike. Pancreas has to get extra work in, and also we have a buildup of glucose and stored fat, right? So complex carbs are the one that we want to shoot for, okay? Now these are often packed with the nutritional layers of bran and fiber. So if we go back here, if we remember this image, these are the ones we want to think about, okay? Where they haven't been stripped down, excuse me, they haven't been stripped down to this one layer, okay? So, so they're normally going to be packed with bran and fiber, and that helps make you digest them slowly. Okay, so what we've already discussed here is that the fast processing of simple carbohydrates is what results in those large spikes that overwork our pancreas and cause blood sugar to remain in our bloodstream longer than it needs to be. All right, so when you have a slow digestion, okay, now your pancreas is more balanced. It's not working as hard. It doesn't have to secrete the same amount of insulin to help get that energy into our cells. And that's what we want, okay? So, not digesting as fast also leads to a slow, steady release of glucose, preventing spikes in blood sugar. So I got my thumbs up. Why? Blood sugar spikes is not what you want. How do we avoid them? We eat complex carbs, right? So, there's two main benefits, right? First, you're going to get the same food as a complex carb with all the benefits that accompany it, all right? So the benefits include lots of fiber, slow blood sugar rise, increase in nutrition, etc., right? You're also less likely to eat something processed with a lot of added sugar. So when you're focusing on this type of carb complex, you're less likely to even crave the type that causes those rapid blood sugar spikes, right? So, moving on. So, there's a couple, like I said, we broke down our sections already. We already talked about sugars a little bit. So, we really want to focus here on this word here, fiber, all right? So, this is kind of where I'm going to wrap up for the day. So, doesn't really matter what type of chronic disease we're talking about. It can be high blood pressure, it can be high cholesterol, high triglycerides, any other type of dyslipidemia. It can be diabetes, it can be obesity, just about anything you can think of related to chronic disease. If it's something that you suffer with, fiber is going to help it. Okay. Now, fiber is a complex carb, and the thing about to remember about this, if we scroll up, when you're eating refined bread, refined pasta, refined, um, rice, you're eating pastries, you're eating cookies, you're eating cake, any type of snack cakes, all these type of things. You're drinking soda, drinking lemonade, sweet tea, all of these different things. The commonality among all of these simple carbs is that they lack one of the most important nutrients that we can have, which is fiber. Okay, so the reason why they cause that blood sugar spike is because they don't have anything to slow the blood sugar digestion down. So fiber is a complex carb that isn't completely broken down during digestion. Instead, it passes through your intestines and helps digest other nutrients. Ooh, super important, right? It also helps you feel full longer, preventing overeating. So this is like super important. So we know that we've already learned that if we're on the if we're on the simple carbs side, these digest quickly. They cause blood sugar spikes, which overwork your pancreas and over time can lead to diabetes. And they also make you feel full shorter. And therefore, it causes you to eat more often. This is where your calories go up, and over time, your gain goes up as well. So this is the big deal with simple carbs. All right. So again, complex carbs are literally the opposite. So what are some good sources, right? Legumes, right? Like lentils, beans, and peas. So your pinto beans, your black eyed peas, right? Your red lentils, whatever type of legume you can think of, it's going to have fiber. And you're encouraged to, add that to your diet, right? Obviously, we've never heard anything wrong with eating fruits and vegetables. True story. All right, just sidebar here. True story. I had a client once who struggled with diabetes, who struggled with blood sugar, and one of the things we did when we worked on setting up a specific nutrition plan was we focused on saying, hey, one of the ways we can get more fiber in the diet is to add fruit and vegetable smoothies to your regular routine. And one of their hesitations was that, oh, my doctor told me that fruit has a lot of sugar. Well, that's true. But the thing that fruit also has is plenty of flesh and plenty of skin, which contains lots of fiber, which doesn't allow your body to process the sugar as quickly. So after a while, we had the nutrition plan set up, and over time, that client was able to drop their glucose levels from the high 90s down into the low 80s. Big difference when we're talking about controlling diabetes. All right. So the point I'm trying to make here is nobody has ever, outside of having allergies, nobody has ever become unhealthy, overweight, obese, or diabetic because they ate too many fruits and vegetables. You got to think about that. Okay. Other good sources include nuts and seeds. We already talked about whole grains, things like quinoa, oats, even red and black rice, things like that as well. Okay. So again, long story short, pretty much any type of plant-based food, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, are going to have plenty of fiber and are going to actually fight blood sugar spikes and help reduce the risk of diabetes and other chronic diseases, right? So some of the things that you can start doing, right? Tips to kind of help get carbohydrates, the good kind, right? We don't necessarily want to say good kind. We're going to say complex. We want those complex carbohydrates. Some of the things that you can do, again, try hot cereal like oatmeal. And we're not talking about the instant kind. Okay, you want whole grain rolled oats or you want steel cut oats, not anything that's been processed. Okay, add some whole grain breads for lunch or snacks, right? So you want to read nutrition labels, and we'll do a training on that at some point here. You want to look at your nutrition labels and see, hey, is the first ingredient whole grain wheat, whole rye, something that says whole grain, something like that. Okay? Or if you see something even better, it's only made with whole grain. Okay? So you don't want anything that says bleached or enriched processed grain. They'll tell you on the label. Look beyond the bread hour, all right? Um, Things like brown rice or quinoa, other types of grains that you can add. Barley is another good example. Okay, choose whole fruit instead of juice. Okay, so if you like orange juice, just eat an orange. Okay, eat an orange. Okay, any type of whole fruit instead of just the juice. All right, if you love grape juice, eat grapes. Okay, I personally love black grapes. They taste just like grape juice, but you get the fiber with it because you're eating the whole part. All right, and this part says pass on the potatoes. And hey, the one good potato that you can eat, sweet potatoes, excellent for balancing blood sugar, plenty of nutrition. But for the most part, we kind of want to watch out for potatoes, potato chips, fried potatoes, stuff like that. Other good choices for kind of having that kind of texture maybe would be something like a bean or legume, which would help balance out your nutrition and increase your fiber even better. Okay, so before we go to Q&A, and y'all got lucky over there. If there's anybody on Facebook today who has a question, pop it in the comment section below. But before we get to Q&A, let's do a quick review. Again, main thing on carbohydrates, y'all, is that they're a macronutrient, all right, and we find them in foods, primarily plant foods, unless they're processed. Why do we need them? The main point of eating carbohydrates is to provide us with energy, all right. We know that our brain uses a whole lot of energy, up to 20%. So if you're ever sluggish or feel like you don't have energy, it's because you don't have the right type of carbohydrates in your body. All right. So again, if we eat refined carbohydrates, all right, remember these are the types that have had all the nutrition stripped off. Instead of having the bran and the germ that has nutrition and fiber, it's just the carbohydrates alone. So this causes blood sugar spikes, which overworks our pancreas, which the whole point of our pancreas is to release insulin to help process glucose to get into our bloodstream, right? So we said also that we want to make sure that the choices we choose with carbohydrates are the complex type, okay? We want complex. We do not want simple, simply because they have plenty of fiber that helps us digest the glucose slowly, okay? And we did go over some tips of some things that we can do right now as far as adding more whole grains to our diet. All right. Whew, so that's it. Let's see if we got some Q&A. I guess I'll just get used to those text messages coming in too. All right, so the first one, got my stream over here. See if I can read that message. Okay. What if you have a citrus allergy? Yeah, so that's why earlier we talked about, for the most part, nobody has an issue with eating fruits and vegetables unless there's an allergy. So citrus allergy, boy, that's one of the worst ones, just because there's so many great citrus fruits. But it's simple. If you know there's a citrus allergy, you gotta push that kind to the side. So that means you gotta get your oranges out of there, your tangerines and things like that, grapefruit, lemon, lime, those kind of things, those citrus fruits. We're going to just push them to the side. And instead, we're going to try to start sampling other types of fruits that we know that we can eat. We have blueberries, blackberries, maybe raspberries, strawberries. If you like melons, you have cantaloupe, honeydew, watermelon, different things like that, papaya. So if basically, if you know there's a citrus allergy, unfortunately, you just got to push it to the side and find other ways to get those fruits in. My other text message question, let's see, what does that say? Oops. Best type of bean to add? There is none. There is no best type of bean, right? Now, I guess you could say the darker red and black may have a little bit more antioxidants, more phytochemicals. But at the end of the day, if you like beans, pick any bean, right? Navy bean, white bean, black bean, pinto bean, right? Whatever type of bean that you actually like, add it to your diet. You can't go wrong with beans. Beans generally have plenty of protein, plenty of nutrition, iron, antioxidants, and that F word that we love so much, fiber. It's not the F word you were thinking. Okay. Let's see if we got any other questions here. All right, last call. Q&A. Those are some good questions, actually. All righty. All right, so remember, if you check out this stream at a later date and you say, man, I really had a question about this, drop it in the comment section. It's no big deal. Drop it in the comment section. I always like to check those out and answer questions after the fact. All right. So remember, you make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. You have to have those notifications on so that every time I create one of these wonderful, amazing streams, you're notified, you know what's going on. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at FitnessCharles and also on Twitter at FitnessCharles. Check out fitnesscharles.com to figure out how you can try my 3 times the burn challenge for free, and also join my Fit Forever family so I can turn you into another success story of somebody who changed and transformed their health and their body. All right. So I'll catch y'all next time on the next stream. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Time, every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time as well.